Suzi comes from Hollis, New Hampshire, and is a fifth-year student in the combined degree program at Tufts University and the School of the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. She will graduate this spring with a BA in English Literature from Tufts and a BFA, concentrating in photography from the SMFA. Her art practice is based in portrait photography and in conceptual art that explores wordplay and creative data expression. Her work is currently on view in the 2012 student exhibition at the Photographic Resource Center at Boston University.
When Sherry Levine displayed the series After Walker Evans in Metro Pictures Gallery in 1981, she directly contested the modernist ideal of authorship and the sanctity of the original. One might say that Levine's act of copying could have only been done once. The idea is only interesting when it has never been done before, where it is original. Yet in 2001, Michael Mandelberg created AfterSherryLevine.com, a website that hosts high-quality scans of Walker Evans's work for readily available download. Is this an original idea? Does Mandelberg replace Levine and update her work for the digital age? By examining Levine's work in conversation with Mandelberg's project, this talk looks at what makes each of these works authentic, even as they problematize the concept of single authorship, and argues that the art historical dialogue around the nature of authenticity is neither solely about original objects, nor about original ideas, but about the linkages between the two. Sherry Levine works in the context of what Hal Foster calls post-structuralist postmodernism, a critique of representation and of history. Howard Singerman, perhaps the critic most engaged with Levine's work, articulates the modernist ideal as independence and uniqueness, the standard mythology of the male artist. When Walker Evans was making his pictures in the 1930s, the word male would have most likely been left out, for maleness was assumed as the prerequisite for the true modernist artist. The work of his contemporary, Dorothea Lange, was dismissed as too sentimental, while Evans was hailed for his emotional detachment. Therefore, Levine's act of appropriation not only challenges the inherence of single authorship, but also the presumed maleness of that authorship throughout art history. Through her medium and practice, Levine places her work in dialogue with the discourses of photography and the multiple. She was most certainly informed by Walter Benjamin's seminal essay, The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, in which he states that the presence of the original is the prerequisite to the concept of authority. Levine's work contests the close linkages of the concept of authority with that of myth. A Picasso, or a Walker Evans, is significant because the man is significant. He may have originally risen to recognition of the work he created, but once an artist's independence and uniqueness is confirmed, it is the artist who is purchased, not merely his work or its aesthetic properties. In re-photographing a Walker Evans and claiming his imagery and its aesthetic for her own, Levine challenges the intrinsic authority of the author. Of course, Benjamin implicates photography itself in the destruction of the aura. As critic Hal Foster writes, the photograph is a multiple without an original. The photographic negative itself is not a complete work. It is finalized only once the print has been made. As a negative can be printed any number of times, how can any one print be said to be more original than any other? Furthermore, the availability of the multiple collapses the distinction between viewer and artist. Benjamin writes, at any moment, the reader is ready to turn into a writer. The mythic status of the artist diminishes once his singular authority is questioned. Levine's challenge is thus twofold. She confronts the sanctity of the single author by adding her own name to Evans's byline, and questions the proprietary nature of any original material, presenting both the images and words of others as her own. Levine's broader project hinges on context. She presumes a viewer who is aware of its cultural relationships, its references to earlier actions, imagery, and theories. From this perspective, it is these connections themselves that quality work. A viewer unaware of Levine's project might read After Walker Evans 4 as being Alabama cotton tenant farmer wife, Hale County, Alabama, by Walker Evans. Furthermore, a viewer unaware of Evans' position in art history may look directly at the figure of Allie Mae Burroughs, and not at Evans or Levine at all, unaware of any of the layers of authorship through which they peer. But if one is aware of the critical dialogue surrounding the multiple, one realizes that Levine has not only appropriated Evans' image, but expropriated it, removing the ownership from the original author. After Levine's conceptual intervention, neither Evans nor Levine retain single authorship over the image. Levine's strength lies in her conceptual prowess, but her place in the art historical canon is regularly reduced to that of a storyteller, a speaker of ideas rather than a creator. Levine's photographs are legendary, and yet few people actually look at them. There are thus far no artist books dedicated to Sherry Levine's photographs as there are to Walker Evans, and her debut exhibition received few reviews. Her prints themselves are not viewed as important. However, an overabundance of writing circulates around Levine. Her work has been reduced to a strategy. A conceptual strategy has no body, no physical materialization. Yet if Levine's genius lies purely in her idea, why are critics so fixated on the surface of her prints? Critics speak of the many layers of viewing Levine's work, placing her between Evans and his photograph, in front of the photograph, or between the viewer and the photograph. Rosalind Krauss is perhaps most explicit when she states, Levine's act of theft, which takes place, so to speak, in front of the surface of Weston's print, opens the print from behind to a series of models from which it, in turn, has stolen, of which it itself is a reproduction. Krauss refers to After Edward Weston 2, a print from the accompanying series made after Weston's photographs of his nude son. The behind, to which Krauss refers, is a precedent of art history, in this context the Greek chori, which informs Weston's imagery. Krauss's persistent use of language, referring to layers and surface, points directly to the objecthood of Levine's work. Levine is interested in the physicality of her prints and demonstrates care and technique when printing the photographs, which transforms them from conceptual gestures into fine art objects. To say that Levine exists only in not being Evans is to miss what makes it a Levine. Levine's work does not become authentic, become a Sherry Levine, until the physical print and the conceptual framework are linked together. Yet Levine's prints are not easy to examine as independent works of art. Writing on his first encounter of Levine's photographs, Singerman remarks on how difficult they are to look at in person. He found himself focusing on the matting and framing, the work he could be sure was Levine's, and only looked at the image itself in order to search for evidence of rephotography, for the sense of uniqueness of the artist's hand. Singerman is discomfited by the imagery, unsure how to react to it other than to look for affirmation of a modernist, distinct authorship. Levine has stated that she does not want her work to be hung by side with Evans, yet the impulse to visually compare and contrast is unavoidable. Levine's photographs, particularly After Walker Evans 4, appear regularly next to Evans' version in art historical essays and slide lectures. The community scrutinizing these images treats them very consciously as distinct from the originals. Moreover, the poor quality of these reproductions, commonly projected and printed from small or pixelated files, makes the very comparison that their juxtaposition invites utterly pointless. The art student stares at the two images, eyes flickering back and forth, but is ultimately confounded. The search for evidence of the artist's hand in the work is a purely modernist obsession, a desire to match the gesture of the authentic work with its proper artist. What then does it mean to compare two digital print quality scans? Would the ability to distinguish the details make the respective and possibly unique images more meaningful? What Sherry Levine did in the 80s was revolutionary in the postmodernist context, but what does her work mean in the 21st century? In 2001, Michael Mandelberg created the website AfterSherryLevine.com, not merely as a way to update her work into the digital age, but as a way to enter into conversation with it. He scanned the same images that Levine re-photographed in 1981 out of the same Walker Evans exhibition catalog, first and last, offering high-quality scans of Walker Evans' images for free download. His site also provides an artist statement and texts, partially lifted from other sources in the mode of Levine, which entered him into an extended conversation amongst Walter Benjamin and the same theorists with whom Levine is in dialogue. Information is disseminated in very different ways over the internet than in print. Manderberg provides high-quality images to an infinitely wide audience. In this respect, one might view AfterSherryLevine.com as an educational resource. The very same student who is puzzled by the fuzzy slide projection comparing an Evans to a Levine can finally inspect a pristine and vastly more detailed version of the image. Of course, what they are perusing is not, in fact, an Evans, nor a Levine, but ultimately a Manderberg. In which version are the intense eyes and taut mouth of Allie Mae Burroughs most affecting? An Alabama cotton tenant farmer's wife, Hale County, Alabama, an After Walker Evans 4, or an AfterSherryLevine.com/2.jpg. None can be said to be more definitive than any other. The question then becomes one of access. Innumerable versions of Allie Mae Burroughs are available online, easily accessible through an image search. Yet the most intriguing aspects of the search results are the differences between the images. Their cropping, tinting, contrast, even mirroring distinguish the multiple versions of Allie Mae Burroughs available online. There is no standardization, even among versions claiming to be by Evans. Manderberg's high-quality scan then becomes authoritative, as he documents the source and process used to obtain the image. His digital versions are assumed accurate. Manderberg has established himself as the provider of the ultimately authentic digital file. Like Levine, Manderberg has never attempted to conceal his appropriation via scanning, nor obscured the complicated co-authorship of his image. Yet freely circulating in the digital sphere, his images become even more confusing than when housed in a museum and displayed in a gallery. The final elegant gesture in his website's construction is the link in the upper right-hand corner to AfterWalkerEvans.com. When the viewer clicks on the link, they are brought, as promised, to AfterWalkerEvans.com. But the only difference in the site is that the title, Sherry Levine, has been replaced with that of Walker Evans, and the link replaced with one leading back to AfterSherryLevine.com. Through this digital sleight of hand, Manderberg reminds the viewer that to look at a Walker Evans is to look through a Sherry Levine. The text of the site reminds in dialogue with Levine's conceptual practice, not Evans's Farm Security Administration backstory. Manderberg's project is as conceptual as Levine's, complicating the dynamic interchange between authorship and the reproduction of use through digital media. Yet even Manderberg does not eliminate the existence of an object. He includes a certificate of authenticity accompanying the downloaded image, listing the requirements a downloader must complete in order to own an authentic Michael Manderberg. These address the size, print quality, and framing of the image, along with the presence of the signed certificate on the back of the frame. The image is only authentic if printed and framed correctly, that is, if the work becomes an object. He writes, "The certificates here are used to ensure that each satellite image be considered with equal authenticity, not the opposite. This is an explicit strategy to create a physical object with cultural value, but little or no economic value." Manderberg comments on situational irony of Levine's attempt to challenge the mythos of the original, writing, "Levine has made her object even more sacred, as her work is harder to find than Evans's originals." Levine's object has both cultural and economic value, produced through concept and rarity, whereas Manderberg's object has only cultural value, produced through, as it is accessible to anyone who wishes to own it without any monetary exchange. Manderberg finally eliminates the Benjaminian aura, making his work infinitely reproducible and giving each instance of reproduction equal cultural authority. Manderberg posits the possibility of an alternate postmodern originality. Contradicting Benjamin's theory that reproduction depreciates authenticity, Manderberg states, "The reproduction becomes the authentic experience." While Manderberg offers little substantiation for this claim, it seems to hinge upon the ability of reproduction to create something new. The appropriation, or expropriation, becomes the authentic experience. Neither Levine nor Manderberg reproduce Evans's work in the literal sense. They do not print from his negatives. It is through the intermediary step, wherein the image is lifted from Evans's ownership and Levine's practice and placed within the realm of theoretical discourse that the process becomes new. Manderberg addresses the nature of reproduction and remix in the digital age. He deals with a true multiple without original, the digital file, copied and distributed without limit. Benjamin wrote, earlier, much futile thought had been devoted to the question of whether photography is an art. The primary question, whether the very nature of photography had not transformed the very nature of art, was not raised. Mandelberg raises this question amongst the growing din of others. Has digital dissemination changed the nature of art once more? Or is the concept of artistic authenticity still permanently linked to the existence of a physical object, as both Mandelberg and Levine suggest? The integrity of the original only becomes significant once challenged. Therefore, Mandelberg and Levine's work becomes ever more pertinent as current debate over internet piracy, copyright infringement, and remix culture struggles to find a digital definition of ownership and authenticity. Thank you.
As authors now of your own interpretations, how have your own subjective interests shaped the scope of your projects? And or what challenges to your interpretive frameworks do you think might extend this dialogue and author further avenues for questioning authorial practices and interpretation? And I know that that's a big, vague question, but while the rest of us have the opportunity to formulate our own thoughts and questions that we might want to individually ask, perhaps each of you might respond very briefly to that question about what you think remains to be done.
I think the point that I closed on was relating to remix culture and copyright issues currently going on online. I think one interesting relation to that is I actually ended up contacting Mandelberg in the course of writing this paper to clarify a point of whether he had scanned Levine's images or Evans's catalog, because it's confusing, but he clarified that when he did the catalog. But in doing that, he questioned whether he should change his website, aftersharelevine.com, whether he should make that more clear in the wording. And he said this is something he hasn't updated in 12 years, and he's looking at it as sort of an art object and whether it should be altered now. And it became very interesting because there is no physical manifestation of this website art object. And so I think really just looking at sort of how to define something that is art that does not have that tie on the physical manifestation.
Thank you. I think all the papers were very impressive. And I have a question for Suzi. You talked about copying, and I wonder if you can talk a little bit about copyright, because I noticed that you're a photographer. And so how would you feel if someone was scanning your own images and putting them online, maybe without your permission? Because I have some friends who are photographers, and it happens a lot these days with the internet. So I wonder if you could address copyright law a little bit. What's your opinion about it as a photographer, sort of taking a personal approach to the issue?
Yeah, I definitely think that what distinguishes Levine and Mandelberg's practice is the artistic framework they're working in, that they are referencing who the original ownership of the image is and entering into dialogue. I think a respectful dialogue with them. They're not searching to take the work and use it for their own different purposes. It's kind of the difference between whether they're trying to say something with the work that is in dialogue with the original piece, or whether they're abstracting the piece from that and using it for something that does not relate back to the original author. And so I'm interested in that dialogue that is created when they're speaking with how both become in ownership of the image. And I think that's very interesting. And there's been many lawsuits recently that are very interesting, that are developing this idea. And I think also, and there's a lot going along with Creative Commons, it's very interesting where you present your work with the possibility and the opportunity for it to be manipulated and enter this dialogue with. And I don't do that with my photography work, but I do that with my conceptual artwork. I put it online with the Creative Commons signifier so that people know how to interact with it and continue the work.
I have another question for Suzi. I'm curious about that contract, the Mandelberg contract, that I'm assuming you've signed and dated, so it sort of links you to those other three artists. What's the short version of your answer to somebody when they ask you in your hallway, who's that picture by? Is that one of your photos?
say that it was an authentic of Vandenberg I have assembled, I guess, which it is, I guess in that case, it is a little bit of participatory authorship. I had to search storage to find the correct frame and to be able to put it